Back to the first part of your question, understanding an ethical culture, for example, having a baseline of the ethical climate in the organization. It's not going to be a simple 2 out of 3 or 79.3%. You need to have very, very sophisticated metrics that quite often would be based on perceptions of what people see inside.
Okay, everyone, welcome to the Actionable ESG Talks Series brought to you by AKFI, Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And today we're happy to have Daniel join us as the special guest. Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, and this is Isabella, the co-host with Manuel, another co-host of this talk series. Thanks to the talk series, we get to connect with great minds to together discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And before we start, just a quick intro about Daniel to our audience. Daniel is an assistant professor in business ethics at Trinity Business School, and his focus areas are business ethics, corporate governance, and corporate responsibility. And some of his titles including co-chair of the B20 Task Force on Integrity and Compliance 2022, World Economic Forum member of the Global Future Council on Transparency and Anti-Corruption. Also the Africa Regional Partner at the International Center for Corporate Governance in St. Gallen, Switzerland. Thank you, Daniel, for taking the time, and very interesting to hear your insights about the governance part of the ESG today.
Well, thanks very much. I'm very happy to be here, Isabella.
Awesome.
Welcome.
So to start the conversation, we always open up in a very open-minded kind of way to see your perspective on your thoughts. How do you see the current sustainability, ESG, and digital transformation evolve in terms of governance and corporate ethics?
Well, thanks very much. I think, for me, it's very clear that there's been a rapid escalation or acceleration of interest in sustainability and ESG issues. And I would attribute it mostly, I think, to climate change and the fact that we now have sort of tangible evidence and visible evidence that this is real. So, people experience floods, they experience droughts, and sort of runaway wildfires, etc. So we always said that the science was solid, but now people, can see it. And therefore, there's a renewed interest in sustainability broadly, but more specifically ESG. Now, the ESG agenda, I think, has been driven to a large extent by institutional investors. If we track the history of ESG, some people would disagree, but it goes back roughly to 2005, thereabouts, and investors are now also looking at this, from an investment perspective. They see the risks that they are being faced with, and therefore I think we see a lot more sort of embracing it, and all of a sudden, making their investment decisions based on ESG criteria. That is obviously also, and this is where technology comes in. It is a lot easier to do it now with the aid of technology, because you can sort of analyze. You have access to a lot more information. You can analyze it very, very quickly, and therefore the interpretation to some extent has been automated or augmented by technology. That in itself, I think, also presents a risk, and a risk. We can come back to that because it takes away some of the sort of the human ability to interpret and to make decisions. From an ethical point of view, I think that certainly, if you look at ESG and the origins of sustainability, ethics is always featured very strongly in discussions about this. And we are now also in the work that we do trying to bring it sort of back by focusing on the G of ESG and governance, and the fact that that is or has to be based on ethical values like transparency and accountability. But I would say, and perhaps a cynical point to make, but many of the institutional investors who are embracing ESG at the moment are not doing it for ethical reasons. They're purely doing it because the business case for ESG is so strong at the moment, given what we see happening in the world.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And before we move forward with the next question, I actually touch on something very dear to Isabella. She just wrote her first book. She just launched her first book, The Digital Mind of Tomorrow. And she has many questions. It's a book of questions. And she has many questions about really the reliability. And it's the first time I use ethics and AI in the same sentence, but the AI seems not to have an ethical code yet.
Right, like Daniel says, the role of humans, right? Like there's certain things. How do we balance between the machines and the role of us in this uncharted territory of technology dominated future? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to respond to that, in the field of business ethics, that's also developing quite rapidly to investigate the ethics of AI. For example, at the World Economic Forum, I'm involved in a project or initiative that's called Tech for Integrity, and we are trying to explore the ethical dimensions of technology as a whole. And there are some areas that are easier perhaps to see that link, the way in which biases that people have would be built into technology. And we've seen those examples of machines becoming racist or homophobic because of the way in which they've been programmed. And obviously there are also many ethical issues around data privacy, access to information, etc., that we can expect to continue for many years to come.
Oh, that's very interesting. And Daniel, if I may, I'll take what they call it in US rain check for the next conversation on this very topic, because I think we can go much deeper into that area. And as you said, it's a very closely observed area right now, not only by the World Economic Forum but also by governments. As the media becomes so prevalent and starts to help us make decisions, help sometimes under quotation marks. But I want to switch the conversation a little bit toward your article that you published in the MIT Sloan, I think recently. And you connected business integrity and ethical challenges. And as you said at the beginning of the conversation, you bring into focus very, very much into the focus the G part, the governance part of the ESG and sustainability. And I think you in the article you mentioned a number of case studies that illustrate this link between corporate ethics and the integrity. And I think the article was very well received, by the way. Any case study you would like to briefly share with us?
Yeah, thanks, Manuel. I think before I talk about a specific case, perhaps just to give a bit more background as well, the article was based on a white paper that we prepared at the World Economic Forum towards the end of 2021. And it really focused on something that became more prevalent to us, that we call it the rise of the chief integrity officer, and what we witnessed in many large corporations around the world, and then also explored that through interviews and mini case studies, was that the role of people responsible for ethics within organization has been elevated, to a very, very senior C-suite position, and also looking at breaking down silos between sustainability and governance and compliance, in order to have a more holistic and integrated way of addressing integrity. And sort of interesting, as I'm a former philosophy student, the word integrity and integration, they have the same root of wholeness, of being, one. And I think that's important, and we see that reflected to some extent in what companies are doing. So one of the companies that we looked at, and actually I had the privilege last week to spend a bit more time with them, is Novartis, the pharmaceutical company. And what they did in the space was to integrate the roles of risk, of integrity, ethics and compliance. So the person who is responsible for that within Novartis, Klaus Moosmeier, is the Chief Ethics, Risk and Compliance Officer. And so we've seen that that position takes overall charge of the different silos that have been broken down. They've also looked at technology and ways of bringing in technology to help them to manage this area. And if you read their code, which, by the way, was sort of crowdsourced, they involved all their employees around the world in developing the code that people now subscribe to. They looked at decision science, they looked at data science, they looked at behavioral science, and sort of incorporated all of those into not only the way in which they develop the code, but also how they manage integrity inside the organization. So that is the major shift that we've seen. I think both governance and corporate integrity have struggled for a long time from this tick box mentality, from a compliance mode where big companies, specifically in the US, but around the world, were so focused on staying out of trouble and just doing the right thing in the sense of ticking boxes, that they didn't understand the importance of ethical culture. They didn't understand, the complexity of human beings in terms of empowering them to make ethical decisions based on values. That they were only focused on getting, staying out of trouble, if I might put it as bluntly as that. And we see that shifting now. So that G of ESG is a more comprehensive, it's a more holistic interpretation that's certainly based on an ethical foundation.
And you linked very clearly ethics and culture. And I think, if I understood you correctly, you actually talk about the overall corporate culture, not only as a, culture officer kind of function inside the corporation, or ethics officer or compliance officer. And it seems that Novartis is in some way the leading edge in this approach to integrate ethics and ESG and governance. And I don't know if in your studies you find out other examples. In other words, is it a trend, or we're just seeing the beginning, the rise of this corporate ethical function?
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly a trend, and that's what we picked up in terms of the job description, if I may, of people who are responsible for this function or the cross functionality in organizations. And in all of them, there is this acknowledgement that culture is incredibly important. People often say culture eats strategy for lunch or for breakfast. If you don't have that culture of openness, if you don't empower people to speak up, to really feel supported in terms of doing the right thing, then you're on very dangerous grounds. If you join a new organization, I think that it's clear that most people, when they join a new organization, yes, they read the code, they attend the induction training, etc., but they very quickly get a sense of how are things done around here. What is the culture? What is the climate? and then they would fit into that and hopefully feel comfortable with it if it's something that would support them to do the right thing. If you haven't, and we can see those examples going all the way back to Enron, which was sort of to a large extent compliant in terms of having the code and having the compliance officer, etc. But the culture was rotten, and therefore, we know the history. By the way, my undergraduate students these days don't know. If I ask them about Enron, they don't remember it because they were not born when it happened. So it also gives us a bit of a historical perspective on how far we've come, since Enron.
Actually, there is an author that studied Enron. I can send you the link after this call.
Please.
Because there is a whole book on Enron and exactly what you're saying. They were she invented the term legal fraud, actually, because the Enron played within the legal boundaries, but as you said, legal or compliance is not enough. It's not a substitute for ethics. It's not a substitute for culture. It's a tick box or a number of tick boxes. Yes, we submitted these documents on this time, right?
Yeah.
So you absolutely touch on something that also we're looking very closely. And ESG, by the way, suffers also a lot of the reputation of greenwashing. I have students at Cornell. I'm an instructor there, and when we're looking at sustainability, they talk about their culture inside the company, and sometimes skews toward marketing and sales rather than toward ethics, compliance, and really reports on sustainability. So you're very, very much in line with our thinking about that.
That's great to hear, and it's something that I explore quite often with my students, but also with corporate clients that I work with. Is this sort of the relationship between the legal and the ethical lines that that we draw? And then, as you talk about legal fraud, the term that I picked up a long time ago that I quite often use is this idea of lawful but awful, and that's where you struggle with this type of behavior that is legally okay but ethically frowned upon, and that's really where the culture of the organization, rather than the compliance officer, would help to guide people to do the right thing.
And one of the previous people that joined us, Keith Ong, actually talked about the role of the middle management in transformation and implementing sustainability. He's a hands-on expert. He goes to Africa and advises governments there and companies. And he picked up that really the transformation has to happen from the middle. It's not enough to have somebody up there or to be a grassroots movement. It has the role of the middle management in his approach cannot be under or forgotten or not taken in consideration.
I fully agree, and I know that Mervyn King, the South African doyen of corporate governance, often referred to that as well. We said, we always talk about tone at the top, but we should talk about tone at the middle, because that's where a lot of the risks would also lie. And if you don't get that right, it doesn't help if you only have the very top people of the organization being committed and saying the right things.
I don't want to monopolize the discussion, so Isabella, please add on, and I have so many more questions after that.
It's always enjoy to hear the discussion, and I can see Daniel is definitely a philosopher, and I didn't know you were studying philosophy, not on your bio, so that was a good surprise. And I think to the point, we all can sense that we can move forward without talking about it philosophically, on the ethical level, on the humane level, and no matter what regulation we put out there, Daniel said that people can feel your culture. You can have a whole 50 pages of programs to illustrate your corporate culture, but what's the real culture is, it's within the daily activities and people can sense it. I guess that's part of the transparency as well. You can fake it even though you're trying to, or you try to fake it until you make it. But what's actually in your organization, you better face it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe to continue a little bit with the questions, but I'm going back to your article in the MIT Sloan and as you said, your white paper and your research. But I picked up one of the three recommendations, which is on sort of on the conclusion of the article. And you said that companies that want to improve in this area of ethics and reducing essentially risks, I think you're saying there, must first establish a clear baseline understanding of their ethical cultures. That's exactly what you're talking about. And then not only take a static picture, right? Okay, this is where we are, but make it actually a program, making it a tracking the progress over time as we track any other strategy inside an organization. So essentially sustainability and ESG reporting had been many times criticized for presenting only the nice part, the good side of the and what we call it greenwashing. We talked a little bit about that already today. And the question: what recommendations do you have do you have for reducing and hopefully eliminating these practices? Because really, they take a lot out of the good of the sustainability of the ESG initiatives, the good for the people, the good for nature, the good for good governance. And that's really the question. Do you sense that we are at the point where we can make some strong recommendations about how to straighten the sustainability and ESG reporting?
Yeah, I mean, that's another huge question because first of all, I agree with you. I think, the track record of sustainability reporting is a bit tainted because we know that many companies have used it in the past as greenwashing or blue washing. For me, it's always interesting when I talk to companies who I work with them and I ask the question, where is that function situated, inside the company? And when you hear it's sitting in the marketing department or corporate communications, you already get a sense of, this is not really where it's supposed to be, because it should be about honest communication, telling both the good and the bad news. And ironically, we know that companies who share bad news actually benefit from that because people trust them more, and they would then see the company as being honest in terms of sharing both good or bad. So that's one way of addressing it. We also know obviously a lot of consolidation is happening at the moment. I've never seen so many changes in the corporate reporting or the non-financial reporting space in my life, because we now have the International Sustainability Standards Board, and we've seen sort of that consolidation through integrated reporting, the GRI being involved, SASB, etc. And I think that's great. I think it's important that we do get to that global standard that will help us, to have something that's comparable. That you try and focus on the data, on the metrics, which is stuff that you cannot manipulate. If you see the numbers, then it's very different from putting a pretty picture on the front page of the report. But there are risks involved here because with the accounting industry, driving this process at the moment, I think there are some warning signals or some concerns that people have that should be taken seriously. in terms of really understanding how to measure, what to measure, and to try and get away from, you know, this mentality that it's only if you can put a number to something that it is important and measurable. So coming back to, you know, to the first part of your question, understanding an ethical culture, for example, having a baseline of the ethical climate in the organization, it's not going to be a simple, you know, 2 out of 3 or 79.3%. You need to have very, very sophisticated metrics that quite often would be based on perceptions of what people see inside the organization, what they see their peers are doing, the competitors are doing, and that might be, you know, presented in form of a narrative of people telling stories of the culture inside the organization rather than trying to pinpoint it to a specific number. So I think that's part of the challenge of the you know, consolidation in sustainability reporting, is, you know, to find ways in which we can talk about the you know, the creation of value, the culture of the organization, and giving people the right information, you know, that they need to really make up their minds. You can give them 10 million data points, and that it might look very impressive, but if it doesn't make sense, if they can't construct meaning out of those data points, then it's actually not worth very much.
Yes, and the whole concept of meaning and also organizations function as a mini social environment. They're, you know, especially large organizations, and it's very interesting how they operate. We also actually in AKFI we started with the help of an intern as well from Minerva University in California, and we're working to find out what are the roles of the CSO. We base that on studies that are done in the industry, and PCW has a study on the role of the CSOs. And as you said very well, and this is for me a quick way to measure how true is the ESG, is where the CSO reports, if they have a CSO first. Many don't, or the role is much lower. You know, it's management of sustainability, manager of sustainability. The second, does she report to in marketing? Does he report in HR or in legal? And that tells you, because people fit the role. You know, if your boss is a lawyer, you're not going to, you know, report or start to stray away from reporting on compliance, for instance. You're not going to be a whistleblower.
Yeah.
So you got a very, very interesting point, and yes, and today really you link ethics and culture in a way that I haven't seen so strongly linked before. And in some way, when I was thinking about corporate culture, ethics sort of, it's implicit. It's, as you said, it's very hard to evaluate, and it's much harder to pick it up even as what is the culture of the company. The culture of the company is, let's say, to reduce carbon footprint, or to reduce the consumption of water, or to save trees. But how do you get to that ethically? It really seems to be even a bigger challenge. Absolutely. And you had a great example of Novartis. But Isabella, I'm sorry, but today I'm speaking more. So I would like you to pitch in.
Daniel did a wonderful job inspiring you. I think Daniel did a wonderful job inspiring both of us, Daniel, because you really see the, I'll call it, human side of everything. And that has been neglected for long time, since industrial age. Because when you were sharing, what I hear is overall, you have an optimistic, perspective in terms of how we're waking up to start pay attention to ethics. However, the second thing I can sense is that it's a hard thing to really implement, to measure, because of this. We hang on this data number game for too long. Our brain, younger generation, even me, millennial, we're trained to just fit in some sort of framework system with numbers. And the real value part, the really human characteristics, what we're unique aside from the machine, it's our value, our meaning. No one teaches us. And how do we fill that into the form, in the number? It's almost impossible. So almost to me, it's like there's this new way of thinking, new way of evolving that it's, heavily missing, that we need to look for. And you were part of this process, in my opinion, to educate and to bring this voice. And I wonder, how does that go during the process when you trying to communicate this kind of value? Because it's hard to, like you mentioned, hard to describe or hard to sense. There's no number to show results, no way to value, to measure. So there must be something you want to share about this process when you work on it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is a challenge, and I think it is, it's an ongoing process of helping people to understand why this is important. And especially if you think of people in senior positions inside organizations, and even more specifically when you talk about corporate governance, the role of the board of directors and the non-executive independent directors that you have, if you really expect them to do their job of guiding the organization, of directing it, and making sure that it's under what we call prudent control in corporate governance language, then they need these skills. They need to be fluent to a large extent on ESG. They need to be able to have intelligent conversations about it. And at the same time, they also need to understand technology. They need to understand what it can do, but they also need to understand the limitations. Perhaps artificial intelligence is going to help us along the way, by getting us, to levels where some of that could be, cleverly designed into the program, that you get to the material issues or get to easier interpretations more quickly. But you're right, it's an ongoing process, both in terms of my work as a professor to teach business students who will hopefully be in positions of leadership 5, 10, 15 years from now, but also working with clients and those ones who are asking for help, who understand on the one side why this is important, but they need guidance. So it's an ongoing process of engaging with them, learning from them, learning more about specific companies and industries, and jointly looking for solutions.
Lovely. And
it's a full transformation process. It's not only digital transformation, it's not only sustainability transformation, but transforming humans, changing humans' mind. It's a much longer, much slower, and much more complex process than even a self-taught AI system can, for now.
Yeah.
Do.
Lovely. Thank you, Daniel, for raising the voice, and we always say that almost is impossible to have a conclusion or a solution today out of one discussion. Like, we've done this many times, but every time we enjoy it just by discussing it, to exchange idea, because that's already a progress, in my opinion, in moving to the right direction in order to find the proper solutions. So thank you so much for sharing this valuable voice with us, with the audience. And to end it, maybe just give us a quick piece of advice. You outlined throughout the conversation, but what's your takeaway?
And we want you back, by the way, before you give the advice. So give us as much as you want today.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation, and I would love to to come back. I really enjoyed the conversation very much from my side as well. It's very difficult to have one or two takeaways. I would certainly say, the one thing that would be important from my perspective is to emphasize the fact that ethics and sort of a commitment to integrity has to underpin our discussions about sustainability and ESG, even though there is sort of a very strong business case as well for looking at these issues now. If we don't understand that ultimately it does come back to issues around accountability, to honesty, to dignity, then we're going to lose out on a large part of the conversation. It will be difficult to address the cultural issues, and therefore any other projects that are not based on those ethical principles will be very difficult to get off the ground and to progress. So we need to find ways of doing this, and companies also need to be innovative and find their own things. I mean, Patagonia has been in the news over the last couple of days in terms of the founder giving away, the wealth of the company. That's a great story to tell, but it is an outlier. Not every company is going to do that. We might take some inspiration from it, but ultimately, and I'm often reminded, and perhaps that's a good way to end from my side. The comment that has often been made when we talk about these issues is that it's not what you do with your money, it's how you make your money that is important. And with Patagonia, we've seen good examples, both on the making the profits, but also doing something with it at the end. But if you focus on those issues, you focus on the core ethical principles underlying that G in ESG, then I think you're off to a good start.
It's walking the talk, right? It's not only the talk.
Exactly.
It's doing, and Patagonia, it's a very interesting example. Yes, it's an outlier, and one of the questions long term, it's actually sustainability shouldn't be only related to charity, to donations, and so on. Actually, sustainability should become part of the profitability of the company. And I think there is a lot of push, especially from the younger generations, the Gen Zers, that are holding the companies to actually perform according to what they are saying. So I think there is pressure on their ethics also from outside, which I think is very welcome, because the companies are very quick to understand that and operationalize it, as you said, in the example of Arctics.
Correct.
So, well, we definitely want you back. And I don't know if the topic of ethic AI is something that it's in your, in your universe, but will be, I think, an interesting beginning of a next conversation.
Fantastic. It's a fascinating topic. I am still learning quite a lot on it, so perhaps it's too early for me to try and say something about it, as I still need to do a bit of reading, but I would love to be part of those conversations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Again, thank you for taking the time and sharing this valuable insight with the audience. And thank you to our audience as well for joining us. Hopefully you guys get to tuning in every week for a new episode of AKFI's Actionable ESG Talks Series, where you can gain new perspective on how to mitigate risks and create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. Until the next week, thank you, Daniel, again, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye, Daniel, and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.